The original Pegasus 35 Turbo and subsequent Peg Turbo 2 were some of my favorite running shoes ever. But for no discernible reason, those shoes never got a real update. Until now. This is the Pegasus Plus. It's time to take it for a run. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys all about the all-new Pegasus Plus. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that I bought myself. No one sent them to me. Nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their shoe in this video. And no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Pegasus Plus. And let's start with the specs. This is a 35mm stack height shoe with a 10mm drop, giving us 25mm of ZoomX foam in the midfoot. In contrast to the first two versions of the Turbo, this one doesn't have a React co-layer to go with it. It's nothing but that ZoomX foam. Now to protect all that midsole foam, we do have some waffle rubber, which is something that Nike is famous for. And in contrast to previous versions of the Turbo, it isn't full rubber coverage in the outsole. And the other question that this outsole raises is the naming of this shoe. Now the technical name for this shoe is the Nike Pegasus Plus. And even on the badging on the tongue of the shoe, it just says Pegasus Plus. And so the word turbo doesn't appear anywhere kind of like in the name on the website or in the badging on the tongue of the shoe. But when we do look at the outsole here, it does indicate that it's a turbo shoe. Now, the Pegasus Turbo always had weird naming. The first year when it came out, it was a variant of the 35. So it was actually like the Nike ZoomX Pegasus 35 Turbo. And then the following year, it was a Nike ZoomX Turbo 2. Now, I don't know why they didn't call this a Nike Pegasus Turbo 3. And maybe that's because there was that like the nature version of the Turbo that was also in here. And so they didn't want to call it a 3 or a 4 and have people wonder where the 3 was, since the nature version of the Turbo also wasn't called the Turbo 3. But this also isn't really technically being called a Turbo, but it does have the word Turbo on the bottom. So like, I don't know why Nike seems to be distancing itself from the word Turbo, but nevertheless, there is a lot of turbo heritage in this shoe. Looking to the upper, we have a silhouette that looks pretty much cut and pasted from the original Pegasus 35 Turbo. We have the same heel flare. We have the same bulb in the back of the heel cup. The tongue is slightly different. It actually looks more like the tongue from the Peg Turbo 2. But otherwise, the silhouette, even including that racing stripe down the center of the shoe, all is pulled directly from the Peg Turbo version 1. The only thing we're really missing from here is the fly wires, which I kind of wish that they would have gone back and included on this. But instead, what we're getting on the Turbo is Flyknit. Now, Flyknit is one of my favorite knit materials that is available in running shoes, and we actually have real Flyknit in the shoes. Now, sometimes when Nike puts Flyknit on a shoe, it's not really Flyknit, or they've done something to it that makes it kind of weird. So like, there used to be a Chuck Taylor Flyknit, which looked like it was Flyknit, but it was like a layer of Flyknit glued on to like an underlayer that made the shoe not feel like Flyknit at all. And then we've also saw a really weird Flyknit in the first version of the Invincible, which kind of looked like Flyknit, but it just didn't feel like Flyknit at all. The Flyknit in the Pegasus Plus definitely feels like Flyknit, although it's not entirely made out of Flyknit like kind of the Vaporfly 4% Flyknit was. But instead we've got it kind of like on the sides of the shoe, on the lateral and the medial sides. And then we have more of a traditional mesh both in the front of the shoe and in the back of the shoe wrapping around that heel cup. There is a pretty decent heel cup also that's back here, and a decent amount of padding along the heel cup and in the Achilles flare, all very similar to both the Peg 35 and also the Peg 35 Turbo. And in terms of how this all fits, it still feels very much like a Peg Turbo did, although the Peg Turbo went through a lot of different kind of like sizing variations over its relatively short lifespan. Like the initial, I think, first two launch colorways, the black one and then the pink one, both had really tight toe boxes, almost like diamond shaped, where it got pointy like over your middle toe, and had a really narrow toe box. I think there was an inline change later in the year, so other colors of the Peg Turbo 1 had a little bit more space in it, and then by the time we got to Peg Turbo 2, there was a different material, and the toe box got a lot more spacious, but it still had that same kind of triangular and snug fit to it, and we're getting that again with the Peg Plus, but I'd say it fits better than the Peg Turbo 1 does and more like the Peg Turbo 2 did. Now, when it comes to weight, Nike's been giving their weights in size 10s, but I usually report mine in US men's size 9. That's the reference size. And on my scale, this shoe came in at 8.9 ounces and 252 grams. Now that we've talked about what the shoe is like on paper, let's talk about what it's like on the road. The Pegasus Plus definitely runs like a turbo. It's got that similar shape and feel to the toe box. It's got that same aggressive drop that feels like it's really high in the heel and then drops off very aggressively in the forefoot. And it's got that same snappiness and quick turnover that the original Pegasus Turbo and the Peg Turbo 2 had that were so much fun. And it even still has that feeling where it's kind of like, it doesn't feel like there's enough midsole foam underneath the forefoot, but yet you can take it for longer runs and it still does a really good job, and it still feels like it's cushioned and protecting you while also feeling like it's a fast and responsive foam as well. So like it very much has that kind of essence of what the Turbo was, but we are using some updated materials. And if you were to only look at it on paper, you think this is a really big upgrade because previous versions of the Turbo had ZoomX and React foam, which was a mixture of a premium foam and a daily training foam. And now we only have that premium foam. It's an all ZoomX foam. But I feel like ZoomX has been changing over the years. I feel like Nike has definitely been tinkering from what ZoomX was, and I think ZoomX was at its best in the Vaporfly 4% and then the Vaporfly 4% Flyknit. I feel like those were like pinnacle ZoomX that was super lightweight, it crinkled up super fast, and it made everyone super nervous that it was falling apart. And I guess in some ways it kind of was because it didn't have the greatest durability. It was a premium race product that had race products lifespan to it, and that kind of made people upset. And I feel like Nike listened to that and made ZoomX more durable, which also had the predictable side effect of making it feel less premium. It was less light, it was less snappy, it was less cushioned, which means it felt a little bit firmer. Certainly lasted a little bit longer, but I feel like we lost a little bit of the edge as we go from the ZoomX foam that was in the 4% and 4% Flyknit to the ZoomX that we're seeing these days in shoes like the Invincible 3 and in the Pegasus Plus. I'm not saying that it's a bad foam, it still feels very good, and in the net of it all, I do feel like the ZoomX that's in the Pegasus Plus kind of feels like the combination of ZoomX and React that we initially had in the first two iterations. And I feel like this is really nice. I really do like it, but it's not quite as big as an upgrade as it might seem on paper. One area that it is a really big upgrade though is that there just is a lot more cushion to it underfoot. I also ran some miles in an old pair of Pegasus Turbo 2s, and while I do talk about how much I love that foam, running in it now in 2024 in a shoe that came out in like 2019 or so, you definitely see how much shoes have really changed in a relatively short amount of time. And so while I'm complaining about how ZoomX isn't what it used to be, in the Pegasus Plus, the ZoomX that we have is doing a really good job for what this shoe is trying to deliver. And overall, I gotta say that I'm just really excited about the Pegasus Plus. I like this shoe a lot. It brings me back a lot of really great nostalgia and memories. It's familiar and it's fun. Now, before we wrap up the video, I think it would be really helpful if we take a step back and take a look at the Nike lineup as a whole to see where the Pegasus Plus fits in a Nike rotation. Now, I always talk about starting with a daily trainer when you're taking a look at any running shoe brand. And for Nike, that's going to be the Pegasus. This is a shoe that's been around for 41 iterations. This is version 40 that I have right in front of me. And this has been the centerpiece of Nike running for a very long time. Now, where the Pegasus Plus fits in is, I really feel like it fits in as an alternative to the Pegasus. So if you're not loving what the Pegasus is doing, the Pegasus Plus is going to fill in the exact same role that a Pegasus was. You could use it for your easy days. You could use it for workouts, both on the roads and even a couple of workouts on the track. And so if you are really enjoying the Pegasus Plus as your daily trainer, I think that the racing shoe from Nike for your marathons that you're going to really enjoy is going to be the Vaporfly. This is the Vaporfly version 3. And the shoe that kind of fits in between that in terms of the daily trainer and the racing shoe is going to be the 5K, 10K racer. That's the Zoom Streak. Now, I don't actually like this shoe all that much for 5K, 10K racing, but it's got ZoomX foam in it and it's got a plastic shank in there, not exactly a carbon fiber plate. And it ends up being a pretty low to the ground, lightweight shoe that you could use for workouts, especially if you're a faster, shorter distance runner, where the Pegasus Plus, even though it is lightweight and fast, might be still a little bit too bulky for your workouts. The Zoom Streak is going to be a really great workout shoe for you. And then I think for both your recovery run and for your long run purposes, I think the Invincible, I have the Invincible 3, is going to fit in really well. And I think this is going to be a really solid Nike lineup for a lot of people. But let's rearrange these shoes a little bit, and I'll bring some other shoes in to make kind of like what I think would be like an ideal Nike lineup for someone who's a high mileage road marathoner. I still put the Pegasus Plus as the daily trainer from a Nike lineup, but for racing, I'd pick a different shoe, at least for racing marathons, and that's going to be the Alphafly 3 is the most recent version of that shoe. I feel like that is something that is tuned a little bit better for marathons, at least in my experience and what I'm feeling underfoot for the way that I run. And so then instead of the Zoom Streak as the session shoe in here, I would then reach for the Vaporfly version 3. I would like this shoe more for workouts and for shorter distance racing, like that 5K, 10K, even up to the half marathon. I feel like this is a really fun shoe to run fast in. I do know that a lot of you guys run marathons in it and run really well, but I feel like the way the geometry is for the Vaporfly 3, that it works better for me as a session shoe. And then for my long run and recovery run shoe, you could either use the Infinity Run, that's certainly an option, but I always find that the shoe is very wide in the footprint and a little bit too kind of blocky for me, that I just don't roll well with it. Instead, the shoe that I like is the Vomero, and this is the Vomero 17. I've been really enjoying this shoe. It's more comfortable. I really feel like this is what the Pegasus should be doing, is something that's more Vomero-like, but given the way things currently are, I think in the lineup, I don't think Nike really has an excellent max cushion shoe, and I think the Vomero 17 is kind of the closest that they have. There's also a little bit of stability in this shoe as well built into it because of the really wide flare of this heel. And so on those recovery days where I need to be a little bit more supported, the Vomero 17 will work well. And then I would reach back again for the Invincible 3, not as a recovery shoe, but as my long run shoe. When I've got a 15, 18, or even 20 mile run with a bunch of those miles at a faster pace, whether that's marathon effort, or maybe I've got a really long progression run, the Invincible 3, I just think bounces really well for those moderate level efforts, and I don't love it at really, really slow paces because I think, again, the bounce just isn't right for that. So this would be kind of like my ideal all Nike lineup, and this is what makes a little bit more sense for me. Now let's talk about the buying guide for the Pegasus Plus, and we'll also talk about some alternatives you should consider if you're looking at this shoe. The Pegasus Plus is a versatile daily trainer that you could take for your easy runs and your workouts, whether that's mile repeats on the road or some quick reps on the track, and it's a refreshing blast from Nike's near past. The price for this shoe is $180 though, and while that is the same price that Nike was charging for this shoe back in 2019, 5 years ago, I do think that is a little bit on the expensive side. Let's take a look at some of the alternatives. The first shoe that I think we should take a look at when looking at the Pegasus Plus is from Hoka, and that's the Mach 6. Now, not only do I think that these shoes look very similar, and that might just be because I have the black uppers with the white midsoles, but I think there's also similarities in both the way that the heel cups are designed, the amount of padding that's in these shoes in terms of the upholstery around the heel cup, and even the notches that are in the tongues in these shoes. And I'm not saying that one shoe is necessarily copying the other. They each have their kind of design heritages where they both have kind of convergently evolved to this similar shape, but they are very similar shoes. They're a similar weight and they're similarly fun. I would use both of these shoes in the exact same way. I do feel like the Mach 6 feels a little bit lighter, and it feels like there's a little bit more cushion underneath the forefoot of the shoe, and I feel like the Pegasus Plus has a little bit more of that snappy, quick turnover. But to get to the Mach 6, you're gonna be saving $40 because it comes in at a retail price of $140. Also at $140 is another shoe that I think stacks up really well against the Pegasus Plus, and that's from New Balance. It's the Rebel version 4. This shoe has a lot more space in the toe box, and I just prefer the upper on this shoe a lot more. For a shoe that's a daily trainer that you will want to do some workouts and go faster in, I feel like the amount of padding that's in this shoe and the feeling of lightness in that shoe is much more appreciated. There is quite a bit of difference in the ride sensation to it as well though. Not only does the Rebel 4 have a much wider footprint that should make it feel a little bit more stable, it does feel like it's a little bit less speedy of a shoe and a little bit more geared towards daily training than the Pegasus Plus. And if I had a workout on the calendar, I'd probably reach for the Pegasus Plus over the Rebel version 4. So those are my thoughts on the Pegasus Plus. Really excited that they've reestablished the baseline on the turbo for the shoe, and I'm excited for what this may mean for future iterations in upcoming years. If you have any other questions about this shoe or any of the shoes that I talked about today, feel free to put them in the comments down below. Or better yet, ask me in the live streams that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?